please give them a big, large round of applause to Yossi and Sir Martin.
That was informal.
Very informal.
I'll sit here, Yossi, you sit here. But chairman seat, yeah, chairman seat.
Thank you very much. Sir Martin, it's a pleasure to have you here. I feel very embarrassed sitting next to you.
With my jacket on.
Underdressed,
Yeah.
looking
This is
like
lounge
a slumper.
suit. Lounge suit.
Yeah, so when you look on the dress, who you think is more important, Martin or me? Who think Martin is more important according to the dress? Who think I am more important?
Yossi, yeah.
So why don't you take the jacket, and
Eventually I will.
eventually you will. Okay. Sir Martin, through the years, I heard you speaking and giving your perspective on a number of issues.
Yeah.
And I really, really think it's very engaging, and I would like to share this fantastic audience with this experience.
Yeah.
In the 33 minutes and 20 seconds that we have,
Yeah.
I would like very much to ask you to cover 3 topics, going from the less important to the more important.
Okay.
We should start with the state of the world.
Right.
Then we will move to the state of the industry.
Right. The advertising and marketing services.
Right.
Right.
Or anything else you want to define under industry. And the last one, which is the most important, the state of Sir Martin Sorrell.
Okay, fine.
And you can divide the time as you want. And
Can we talk about Yossi Vardi as well?
no, that's not interesting.
Okay.
And actually, once I set the agenda, I can disappear, and go and have fun, and you will, no, we will, you will start and I will interject here and there. So,
Okay.
seriously, the world,
Okay. So let's
the world is including also China, US,
Okay.
Brexit,
All right.
yellow, whatever you want.
Well, let's start with the US, which is the world's biggest economy.
For the time being.
Well, it will take some time for China to eclipse the US, but getting to your point, the biggest problem is not Brexit at the moment, in my view. It's the relationships between the US and China. And maybe this week or this weekend, the noises are that we will get some form of deal in the short term on trade. I don't think the Chinese will respond to all the issues that the Americans have raised, but on IP and cybersecurity, etc. But I think there is the basis of a deal in the short term. But I have to say that I remain, as I think you might, extremely concerned about Chinese-American relationships, because what this is about is it's the battle for who is going to be top dog. And I was very struck by a chart that Ray Dalio, well-known hedge fund manager, had actually used at the China Development Forum in Beijing a few months ago. And it was about the rise and fall of reserve currencies. He went back to the Dutch florin, which has risen and fallen, the pound sterling, which has risen and fallen, the US dollar, which has risen. I mean, it's been stronger recently because of low interest rates. Euro interest rates are negative. US, you still get paid for deposits, but it's on the top or on the cusp. And the Chinese RMB, which has risen sharply. And if you went back to the 19th century, the Chinese RMB was at a peak as well. So this is what China represents, in a way, is a 200-year swing. The Chinese believe in the long term. I believe in long-term swings. So what you're witnessing is a battle, really, for supremacy. Chinese economy is about 12 trillion now. The world is about 72 trillion, 73 trillion. US 20, China around 12. So that gives you the sort of battleground. So US economy is strong. I know President Trump comes under fire frequently, particularly in the mature markets of Western Europe. But you have to give him credit where credit is due. The American economy is much stronger than it was under the previous administration, through tax reduction, through regulation reduction, and now infrastructure spending. It's wobbling a bit because of the trade and tariff wars and the issues that we're seeing. But there's an election coming up in November 2020, so I would remain pretty bullish about the US economy in the short to medium term. What happens after 2020, November 2020 is another issue because there's a whacking great deficit.
2020 is already over. What do you think?
Well, but
in 10 years.
in the short to medium term, I think okay. Latin America, I remain.
No, before Latin America, in a minute, I remember very well when you surprised all of us. I don't know if it was 10 years ago, 15 years ago, when you announced that you have 15,000 people in China, when most of the people even didn't get an idea what's going on there.
Yeah.
So you were bullish on China?
I remain bullish on China, but I was going to go around the world in an anti-clockwise direction. Latin America bullish because, I mean, there are problems. Obrador in Mexico, question mark. Bolsonaro in Brazil, question mark. Macri, survive or not, question mark. But the general level in our industry, creativity, technological ability, very strong. So I remain very bullish on that. In our new business, S4 Capital, we're building a very strong business in Mexico, Brazil, and Argentina. I think it remains an opportunity because there's pricing power there. There's a bit of inflation and pricing power. Western Europe, wherever you go in Western Europe at the moment, the big five, UK, France, Germany, Italy, Spain, all have major political issues. UK with Brexit, the rest of Europe with Brexit, the 27. France, President Macron under pressure. Germany, who will succeed? Angela Merkel. Italy, we have a sort of coalition government of right and left, which my wife and I would never have thought possible. And then Spain, obviously political difficulties as well with Catalonia and the issues around Barcelona. So really, Rocky, on the east of Europe.
No, but west of Europe.
Well,
so
I remain bearish on Western Europe.
So Western Europe actually is going towards to do the one thing
well,
they've done well.
If you look at percentages of GDP, the US has actually come down as a percentage of worldwide GDP, but it sort of bottomed out and maybe risen a bit recently. China remains strong. India continues to grow. Latin America bounces around because it's very volatile.
So what is the future of West Europe?
But Western Europe continues to decline.
So it will become one big museum.
Yeah, well, the interesting thing about Brexit, Yossi, is, I mean, on the assumption that Boris Johnson becomes the Prime Minister, which looks likely, he talks about it being 1,000,000 to 1 against this morning of coming out on October the 31st without a deal. We'll see. That might be 1,000,000 to 1 against because he's unable to do it rather than the fact that he doesn't want to do it, but we'll see what happens. Very difficult to predict. Whatever happens on Brexit, let's assume for a minute we come out, hard, soft, in some way, no deal. The UK economy has to pivot. Here we are in Singapore. The pivot is to a Singapore, in my view, a Singaporean type of economy. If I went back 50 or so years to when Lee Kuan Yew took Singapore away from Malaysia, if you look at the old newsreels, the black and white newsreels, you will see the same things were being said. Singapore will not survive. The UK economy has to pivot. So instead of being dependent on France, Germany, Italy, Spain, and the EU, it has to become more dependent on the BRICS and Next 11. It also has to become more dependent on the technology companies that you and I talk about all the time. Google, Facebook, Amazon, Tencent, Alibaba, Microsoft, Apple, the three software companies, Oracle, Adobe, Salesforce. Those 10 companies, which are the ecosystem in which S4 Capital operates in, are the companies that the UK have got to attract. So all the regulatory issues that everybody's talking about, all the taxation issues, UK has to become a tax-light and a regulation-light economy, which is attractive for business. This is the irony about what's going on. And you may have seen that a number of the Conservative Party candidates, premiership candidates, are all talking about reducing tax, whether it's Michael Gove and VAT, or income tax, or corporation tax, whatever it happens to be. So Western Europe. Now turn to Asia, just Asia, and the Middle
One last word about
Yeah.
Europe. Would you say that this is the end of the era of Europe on the world economic map?
Well, it could never be the end because you have 5 economies there, which are all $2.5 to $3.5 trillion. Japan is about 5.5, 6 trillion. That's number 3. And then you go to Germany at around 3.5. And then the other 4, the UK, France, Italy, and Spain, are all 2.5 to 3.5. So combined, of course, that was the strength of the EU. It's a very attractive market, but it is mature. And the stock market, if you're a listed company, looks for relative growth, not for absolute growth.
But you know, while United States and China argue basically on job creation, who will create more jobs, what type of jobs, the Europeans are quarreling about Brexit, all kinds of issues which has nothing to do with growth, with productivity, with job creation.
Well, let me just, I think that's a really good point, and I think it's a really good point in relation to the campaigns. And around the 2020 election in America, you saw it last night or the night before with the Democratic candidates, there is going to be this big debate about the benefits or problems around the capitalist system and regulation. The big tech companies, let's call them the fearsome 5, Google, Facebook, Amazon, Tencent, and Alibaba. Tencent and Alibaba in China, all 5 face regulatory issues with the US government and with the China government at a federal level and at a state level or city level. Both, it's interesting, East and West are worried about the growth of these companies. Now, what is interesting, I think, particularly about Google and Facebook, is if you look at them, just to your point, about 60 to 70% of their revenues. So last year, the ad revenues of Google were 125 billion, Facebook 52, Amazon 12. All 3, 60 to 70% of those revenues came not from the big companies, but from the long tail, from the small and medium-sized businesses. So these companies, it's just like Jack Ma says about Alibaba. These companies are the engine of growth of small business and medium business, which in turn is the engine of growth for jobs.
Yeah.
So when you dig...
Also the backbone of democracy.
Yeah, well, some people will argue that they've become, capable of manipulation.
No, I speak about the small companies.
Yeah, well, small companies, yes. But they're talking about the big companies that are capable of manipulation in elections and the like. But I think that's an interesting point because the tech companies argue their position on the basis of, Nick Clegg writes an op-ed on behalf of Facebook, which says we're only 25% of the $200 billion digital marketplace, Google 125, Facebook 52, don't regulate us. I think that's the wrong way to go. They should be arguing much more constructively, which is the fact that 60 to 70% of their revenues come from small business.
Very interesting.
Okay, so
next part of
Eastern Europe, don't underestimate Vladimir Putin. He's been there for the longest period of time. Russia, in this conflict between China and the US, Russia plays a very important part. What will China and Russia do with the faster growth markets, what other people call emerging markets, the Middle East, the balance in the Middle East? What will the Saudis do? So with these tensions that we see, the question of the balance of power is going to be very interesting. Middle East and Africa, to me, represent very significant opportunities, but they are very volatile. And I've seen companies, for example, in Africa, downplay over the last few years. When I was at WPP, we invested in a major company in Africa, and ever since we invested, it's sort of plateaued. And what I see in Africa is opportunities at a micro level, but not on a macro level, because you have 55 or 56 states where the political situation is moving one way or another all the time. Ramaphosa in South Africa may be more positive. Maybe things will get better in Nigeria, 200 million people. Egypt, interestingly, has been really interesting, and there's been growth there in the last few years.
Turkey?
Turkey, yes. I had a very, very big business in Turkey. I was talking to somebody who runs a business in Turkey just this week. Despite the challenges there, and we've had some political changes in the mayoral election there, sort of anti-Erdogan pressure, that remains a very strong 80 million people, a very strong market, and an interesting market, with very good multinational companies, actually. Some really good, like Koch, Really, Ulka. I mean, these are interesting, strong, Dogan, Dohan. I mean, these are really interesting businesses.
Israel?
Israel, well, you know my view on Israel. It's impossible to run an advertising agency in Israel because
impossible to run anything.
Everybody tells you what
Ask
to do.
Netanyahu. He will tell you it's impossible to run anything.
In Israel, Yossi, as you well know, they're all generals. There are no soldiers. So God knows how the Israeli army functions because everybody, we've decided on a direction and they're telling you which way to go. So, but technologically, Israel is very strong. But from a market point of view, from a marketing point of view,
it's nothing.
It's not. No. So,
are you going to do any acquisitions in Israel?
An acquisition in Israel? No, the only thing we would possibly do in Israel is a technologically related thing, not in the agency business. Now, going to Asia, the most important region.
Yeah.
China, India. India, I remain a tremendous bull on. I think Modi's re-election with a surprisingly increased majority is good. I think Modi has made a big difference in India, has focused India, and I think that is the challenge. So India will be the most populous country on the planet in due course. It'll take a bit of time in due course. The issue is infrastructure there, and we all know, and the extremes between one end of the economic scale and the other. So I remain very bullish. Japan remains an enigma for me, dominated in our industry by Dentsu and Hakuhodo, although Dentsu are having a very tough time now. And the Japanese, you see it with Renault Nissan, you see it with Dentsu and Aegis, this concern about control, I just don't understand it. I mean, Dentsu Aegis is a great business. It's well positioned in digital, in media, and in data with Merkle. But the Japanese seem to be exercising control. For example, in this region, they got rid of quite a successful leader and inserted a Japanese leader here. And frankly, and I'll say this publicly, it isn't working. So you see these things happen. So Japan, and it's a stagnant economy. Everything between there and Australia and New Zealand, I'm very bullish about. Australia and New Zealand, strong economy. We've just taken a position there with BizTech at S4 Capital, and I'm obviously bullish about the opportunities there because of the size of the economy. But economies like the Philippines, like Vietnam, like Bangladesh. Interesting comment. In Cannes last week, we saw a hardware manufacturer, a Chinese hardware manufacturer, who is moving their manufacturing out of China because of the trade war into Bangladesh, the Philippines, I think it was, and Mexico. So you're starting to see, because of the trade war, some moves. It might be a little bit to do with the cost of manufacturing, increasing cost of wages in China. You saw that a few years ago. But there are these other markets, Philippines also, Indonesia,
250 million.
250 million people, very strong economy, natural resource economy. I mean, obviously some climate issues there, climate change issues.
Vietnam, Laos, all these.
Vietnam,
Cambodia.
Very bullish on.
You always were.
It always been. I mean, Vietnam, Scott and I and others at WPP spotted Vietnam. I think WPP's market share in Vietnam at one stage was about 75–80%. So very bullish about that. So in summary, the world is not a bad place. I spoke to...
The world is not a bad place.
It's not in a bad place economically. And
if it's a bad place, where would you go?
I spoke to the CEO of a major commodities company yesterday when I was in Europe. And he said, there is this pessimism around all the political issues that we have, whether it be the Middle East, whether it be the trade war, whether it be relationships with Russia, whether some of the issues. That pessimism, Brexit, that pessimism. And like this morning when I came in and I was changing, I was watching CNBC Squawk Box, and there's this issue around Brexit. You're starting to see valuations of UK companies, of companies in the UK that are dependent on the UK economy, are at a pretty low level. And those value investors who are starting to spot that. So I think once Brexit is out of the way, one way or the other, if it's ever out of the way one way or another, you'll start to see a little bit more optimism creep in the Brexit economy. But talking from an S4 Capital point of view, which is our new company, my focus is US, Latin America, and Asia Pacific. That's really where, I mean,
We will come to S4 in another 5 or 6 minutes. Before
Right.
that, we go, you remember, from the least important to the more important.
Okay.
So that's your view in the world.
Yeah.
I would say that you kind of not very bullish and not very bearish.
Well, just one thing. Central banks are signaling they will hold rates where they are or they will be lower. There's even talk about further quantitative easing. So you're seeing the post-2008 Lehman situation be maintained. Remember, in the UK, if you have euro deposits, they fine you, they charge you for holding euro deposits. That means that, you know, the position of bonds and therefore the equity markets are okay, at least in the short to medium term. I think the critical event is the US election. I think President Trump will be re-elected. Long way to go, but I think that's the likelihood. And then it's a question about what happens after that, what he does in the second term, and we'll see, you have to see. That's, I think, the critical issue. And of course, what happens with US-China relationships, which in the long term, I'm very concerned about.
Yeah. Okay, thank you so far. I think he's entitled to round of applause for, hey, you can do better. He flew all the way for you, especially for you. Okay, I think now we should make a pause and you should take your jacket off.
No.
No, okay.
When I get to me, I'll take it off.
Okay. State of the industry.
Yeah. Industry is, well, it depends on which part of the industry you're talking about. It's a $1.7 trillion industry, $500 billion in media, $500 billion in marketing services, data and public relations, and then about $700 billion in trade budgets, basically. It's the stuff that Amazon is very focused on. It's about $400 billion of the $700 billion, but it's $1.7 trillion. The part that I'm interested in, particularly, is the $500 billion in media. And looking at that, it's the curate's egg. The old stuff is under pressure. So I just came from a conference in Germany called Screenforce, which is interesting because it's all the free-to-air companies in Germany getting together to promote their wares. They've done it for 3 years. So these are competitors who've got together now and said, what we have to do is try and stimulate the primary demand for TV time and advertising and revenues, etc. So for free-to-air, less so maybe for radio, for print, traditional print, pressure remains. So 300 billion of the 500 billion is in the old stuff, but the 200 billion in digital is growing at 20%. Overall, it's probably growing at 3 or 4%. So if digital at 200 or getting up now to half is growing at 20, God knows what really is happening to the traditional media. So the answer to your question is, for the traditional agency holding companies, the big six, it's very difficult. And you see it in their results. And there's an interesting difference amongst the big six between the two that are based in the US, Omnicom and IPG, which continue to do pretty well. The two who are based in Europe, WPP and Publicis, are having a really tough time.
Whom you favor from the two of them?
Between WPP and Publicis? Well, because I'm still long on WPP stock, Yossi, I still have to favor WPP, and I spent 33 years there, so I have a very subjective founder's mentality.
You have to love them in spite of that.
Yeah, in spite, right. But having said that, you know, it's very tough for them. I mean, you know, you go to Cannes, you see them on the beach, you see the lack of performance in the awards. I mean, both Publicis and WPP.
Let's move.
No, but it's important because the talent is under pressure.
Laughing this.
The talent is under pressure. You know, just two things. You saw Publicis' hire of a lead creative disappear to Apple this week, and you saw a group inside WPP, actually in Miami, move off. So the talent inside on the creative end, on the traditional creative end, is under pressure. So the answer to your question about the state of the industry is it's good in parts, but you have to pick selectively. First-party data, digital advertising content, and programmatic. Those
What
three
about
areas.
the elephant in the room, you know, the consulting companies?
Well, there are a couple of things. I don't think Google and Facebook are competitors. I mean, it's true to some extent they're frenemies, but they're friendly. No, but let me go through the threats.
Sure.
So Google, Facebook, Amazon, they are frenemies, but they're frenemies you can develop very strong partnerships with, and we agnostically look at what they do and choose the platforms for our clients in the best way. And in China with Alibaba and Tencent, and with Apple and Microsoft and the three software companies that I mentioned before. You know, we did our deal with BizTech, which is an Adobe platform developer in Australia and beyond. We did that last week. So that's one threat that I don't think is a threat. Those are partnerships. The consultancy side, I did a session with Brian Whipple, who heads Accenture Interactive. Accenture, BCG, McKinsey, Deloitte, Capgemini, Cognizant, Tata Consulting Services, their advantage is they go in up here inside clients. So they would go in at the CEO, the CMO, the CIO, the CTO, the Chief Procurement Officer level, and they sell their services in. We're much more tactical. Our industry is much more tactical. So we have to get a leg up. I mean, at S4 Capital, I'm very focused on three areas that I mentioned: first-party data, digital advertising content, and programmatic. But there's a fourth area which I think is really interesting, which is how can we develop with clients an understanding that we understand fully the strategic end of digital transformation. All legacy companies, there are two buckets of companies now. There's a legacy company, and then there's a tech company. I mean, that's broadly, that you could call the tech companies. Glenn Hutchins of Silver Lake talks about them being disruptors, and the marketplace being segmented between the traditional business and disruptors. And I think that's a very good way of putting it as well, but I think about legacy and digital, analog and digital. All analog companies have the same challenge. The TV companies I mentioned in Germany, the traditional advertising holding companies, how do they change their model to a digital model? At S4 Capital, when we started a year ago with nothing, it was easy. All things digital. We have 4 principles. We're purely digital.
Are we moving to the third part?
No, it's all part of it. It's
okay.
mixed.
No, because I have some questions.
We're purely digital. We're focused on that circular model, which is an iterative model. The days of tentpole campaigns are numbered. That doesn't mean you won't have massive campaigns around the Olympics. Look at what Coca-Cola did this week with Meng Nui in China.
Or the Super Bowl.
Or the Super Bowl, or the World Cup, you know, even the Cricket World Cup. England's performance notwithstanding. But very focused on that iterative model. That's the second point. The third point was we're faster, better, cheaper. This is really key. It may sound superficial and glib, but it really resonates with clients. Faster means being more agile in a 24/7, always-on world. Better means agnostically looking at all the technology, not being dependent on one technology or another, but being able to choose. And cheaper means, well, I know ZBB, zero-based budgeting, is under pressure at the moment, but the zero-based budgeting people like 3G, like Coty, like Jab, will come back with a model which is based on innovation and branding. And then the last issue, or the last core principle for us, is a unitary P&L structure. We're not doing earn-outs anymore. We think that creates a split structure internally and makes people focus on their part of the company rather than the whole. So just coming back to the industry, the traditional parts of the industry are wrestling with all those those trends and changes, and it's difficult for them to move too quickly, particularly if they're listed. If you're in the listed sector on the stock exchange and you're not a controlled company, very difficult to take the long-term view. That's the critical issue.
Question. Now we move. We have another 6 minutes,
Yep.
But if you will need some few more minutes, we will go. Another round of applause. Moving from the.
I'm going to take my jacket off.
Ladies and gentlemen, I'm not joking. You have the opportunity to listen to one of the sharpest and most knowledgeable person in this industry, and you better listen very well. I have done it for 15 years, and every time he made a forecast, I knew what to do because I've done exactly the opposite. No.
You forced me to take my jacket off, and my jacket is
round
attached,
of applause that he now looks like a human being.
and it's attached to my microphone, which has screwed everything up. But never mind.
So Martin, you started WPP 33 years ago.
Yeah.
You started S4 1 year and how many months?
It's 1 year ago.
1 year ago.
Yeah.
For 33 years, between you and me, people thought that you are CEO of a very important company, but the two of us know that you were slave of like 200,000 people that each one wanted a bigger office and a raise in the salary. You had gazillion customers that all of them always wanted to get the price down and to get more product for less money, and et cetera, and you were a slave of all your suppliers, et cetera, et cetera. Now, after 33 years, you got, for the first time in your life, a day of freedom.
Yeah.
Why the hell you went again to do the same thing again?
Well, it's founder's disease, Yossi. You should know about this. You know, I've often compared founding a business maybe inadequately to giving birth to a child. Not physically, but mentally.
You have done it also physically.
No, not physically.
No, you didn't give.
Stop it.
Okay, no.
So I'm very subjective about it. So the answer to your question is, it's not a chore. And you know, you talk about 200,000 people. I was very proud of the fact that we went from 0 people in 1985 to 135,000 who were directly employed, and 200,000 if you took in the associates. If you think about, you know, average size of a family is about 3 or 4 people, that meant 600,000 people were dependent in some way or another for their living and livelihood and their families
That's
on
slavery.
WPP.
That's
is
huge
wonderful.
responsibility.
Yeah, but I thought that was good. We went from 0 to that.
Also, every year the company has done well. Everybody said it's my work, and every year the company didn't do well. He said this is Martin.
But the point is, I think the founder or founders or entrepreneurs or whatever are very different to managers. Now, having said that, the point you're making is very true. The qualities needing to start a business and run a business are different. There are people who are good at starting. There are people who are good at managing. There are very few people who can do both. So the challenge that you put it rather crudely in terms of offices and people fighting with one another. It's not quite that way, but the issue that you raise is a really interesting intellectual and management issue. Getting people to face in the same direction at the same point of time is a very tough thing to do. Now, we, after a year, have 1,400 people now in 18 markets.
How long took you to get to 1,400 people in WPP? How many years?
It took, I would say probably about 2 years.
2 years?
Yeah, but we were getting there. I mean, the big lift at WPP was in '87 when we went after a company which was 13 times our size, which was JWT Group.
Can I make a pause here for just a minute? I would like to make a speculation.
Right.
Why you have done WPP and why you have doing it again. You know, in my case, my mother used to stimulate me, how you say, to encourage me by complaining that I'm an idiot, you know? So she said why all her sisters have smart sons and she's the only one who has an idiot in the family, and I spent 77 years trying to prove her that she was...
Jewish mothers can do it that way. My mother did it in...
No, let me finish. Let me finish. So I'm still trying, I'm sitting on this chair, hoping that she look from above, and at last she will admit that I'm not total idiot. I heard you speaking 2 years ago about your father, and I think you are doing it in order to impress your father, in spite of the fact that by now he's dead. How about that?
No, well, 2 things. My father had a very close relationship with him. He died in 1989 after we took over Ogilvy, and I mean, he lived to see that. But I had a very, very close relationship. You're right. And maybe there is something in what you say about impressing your father. My mother was the complete opposite of your mother. My mother used to drive people crazy by what she used to say, completely opposite to you. My son, wasn't my son the lawyer or the doctor, but, look at what my son has done. So she used to go to she used to be in the reception area of Jewish Care. Jewish Care, which was the biggest day center for older people in Europe. And she used to be at reception. And all she would talk about was me. Used to drive people crazy. So complete opposite to your mother. But there is something in what you say.
And you didn't believe your mother, and I didn't believe my mother.
That's for sure. That's for sure.
Time is running short. Where do you want to take S4?
Well, there's the 4 principles that I mentioned. Purely digital, because that's where the growth is. That iterative model, this is the key. We produced 1.7-second commercials for L'Oréal Paris on Facebook. Why? Because the average amount of time, according to Facebook, that a woman spends on a post is about 1.7 seconds. It is very unlikely that a client would get that solution from an agency other than through our iterative model and the 1,400 people that we have working on first-party data, on digital advertising content and programmatic. And these are people who are half nerd. They're not agency people. The people at Mighty Hive, which is our programmatic consultancy, probably the leading consultancy in the world, come from Google, Salesforce, and Yahoo.
So they are not interested in the size of the office.
They're not agency people. They're technology. They're the sort of people you see outside here.
Took you 15 years, but you saw the light.
But I did, after prompting from you. Thirdly, faster, better, cheaper, and finally, that unitary structure. So where do we want to take S4 Capital? It's now up to we're quoted on the London Stock Exchange.
What is the value you created in
Sorry?
this year? What is the value you created?
It's now $750 million.
Not bad.
It's 3/4 of a unicorn. We relisted in September, so it's really 6 months effort, a little bit more. So we're starting to get a bit of momentum. We've done five moves, 5 transactions. Media Monks, which is the leading digital advertising content production company based.
How much you paid for it?
Paid 300 million euros.
300 US.
And $150 million for Mighty Hive in programmatic, based in San Francisco. So our big centers are San Francisco, Los Angeles, New York, Amsterdam, London, building business now in Tokyo and Shanghai and Melbourne and Bangalore. So, and here in Singapore, of course, we have our first unified
For a
office.
37-year-old kid, it's not bad.
And then programmatic in Brazil and Argentina and Mexico, and then a digital food and drink studio, Caramel Pictures, in Amsterdam, and then last week, BizTech, an Adobe platform developer in Australia and beyond. So those are the first moves, more to come, but what we're really focused on, Yossi, is we're working now for P&G Braun, we're working for Nestle Starbucks on their new launch of the Starbucks capsules, J&J, Bayer, Google, Facebook, Amazon. I mean, our client list is to die for.
Maybe your mother was right.
But what we have to do is to deepen and broaden those relationships, both of existing clients and new clients.
2 last questions.
Yeah.
First of all, I heard that your last hiring is sitting here in the audience.
Yeah, he's due to join us on July the 18th. Yes.
Scott, can you come? We want the debate. How you call it?
He's shy, but you may
here.
tempt him up.
Come over here. We want to present you to the audience.
You're going to get me fired before I even start.
Come and sit with us 30 seconds. So this is Scott Spirit, the last hiring of Martin.
Yeah.
And
he doesn't need to grow, but he's Chief Growth Officer.
You are compensating him well?
Too well.
We haven't really finalized that yet.
The last question, and I want you to give the classical answer of a Polish Jewish mother. When are you going to rest?
Till the day I drop.
Yeah, the answer is I will rest in the grave. Sir Martin Sorrell, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. What a meeting of minds. And a hard act to follow, but I think we've got the people to do it. Thank you very much, Sir Martin, for your time.